Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right. So you should all be seeing the screen that I have over here showing testRigor's website. Um, Before I actually go into the website, I wanted to really run through the slides. So once again, since I'm going to be focusing primarily on this screen, I'm going to take myself off video so I'm not constantly trying to look at myself. But we are once again sharing this screen here, the testRigor slide that you're seeing, and let's get going. So a little bit about me. I've been a solutions engineer manager for a good handful of years. I've been in the automation space, as you can see, for about over 6 years. Based right outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a big fan of animals. I do some woodworking on the side, play some soccer, music, a bunch of random things. But one of my biggest passions is really helping teams solve testing challenges and streamline their test creation. It's something that has really always been intriguing to me ever since college. So with that, let's get into it. So obviously, one of the biggest major problems is test creation and maintenance. They're just typically far too time consuming. And we hear this all the time. And really, one of the biggest parts of this is honestly, there's so many things that make it time consuming. Tests being flaky, QA slows the releases, tests running too long, missing bugs. So this obviously is just a slide to really drive the pain points. And with these pain points, this is what testRigor is all about, trying to help resolve these. Also, keep in mind, the chat is available. So if there are questions that are coming up and you don't want to interrupt me, feel free to send those into the chat. I do have another testRigor SE available to answer some of those questions. So feel free to, once again, send some questions in there. The next slide that we're looking at here, this is showing you what a typical Selenium test looks like. And when I say typical, I mean a very, very small one. So this is actually a login process. And as you can see, it's a handful of, a good handful of lines. However, if something changes about this flow, or let's say you want to change frameworks or something like that, there's so many things that could go wrong. And, you'd have to manipulate this code. So right off the bat, you're going to need somebody like a developer that can actually do that. Where we really pride ourselves here at testRigor is the fact that we're really pushing away from requiring a developer to create your test cases. So what you're looking at here now is that on the left side, once again, Selenium and what some code would look like in Selenium. However, that same code in testRigor would look like this over here. Log in, check if page contains welcome Peter. So testRigor is all about plain English, giving you the ability to really introduce less technical people into the test creation process. So instead of relying on developers, who are very, very expensive people, you can now rely heavily on manual testers, QAs, business analysts, really anybody that can write in plain English. We also pinged a lot of our customers and really just anybody that we speak to about what happens when they're trying to create test cases. And you could see, they start pretty good, but then over time, they tend to level off right around 300 test cases. And that's really where they're comfortable maintaining something. But anything after 300 test cases, you end up doing something like this, where you release a bug or something like that into production. This is I don't want to say a very common occurrence, but it is quite common. And, we're all very familiar with, some major blue screens that recently hit. Well, maybe not recently, but, over the last 6 months, 8 months, there's been some major things that have almost shut down, the airlines and what have you. But once again, that's all because bugs are getting released. With testRigor, we're really trying to push that line, nice 45-degree angle there. Being able to create so many test cases and maintain them over time is one of the values of testRigor, once again, using that plain English syntax. This right here is just one of our favorite case studies here with 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝗴. He got hired as the VP of engineering at IDT, and when he first got there, they basically just said, hey, we need to speed up our automation. And he was able to speed it up a little bit, got them to about 33, 34%, but they were basically treading water. And as you can see, they've implemented testRigor, and since implementing testRigor, now they have 91% of their test cases automated. And that happened in under 9 months, all using manual testers. So that is quite impressive. You know, the jump from 33 to 91%, that's, you know, very impressive. I still have trouble believing it myself, but it's, you know, he comes to conferences with us. Keith is amazing. He loves testRigor. And why does he love testRigor? Well, the same reason so many other companies are choosing testRigor. So no coding required. You know, there's a lot of tools out there that push the whole low code concept, but with low code, you still need to know how to code. With testRigor, you don't. And if there are specific things that you need to code, because that's the only way that you could do certain things, our team would be more than happy to help with that. We also have a bunch of built-in reusable rules. We'll talk about this once we get into the UI a little bit, but a reusable rule, if you think about it, is basically a function. That function is completely customizable. So we have a handful of built-in ones, but then once again, you can create your own customizable reusable rules as well. Once again, very limited test maintenance, and you'll see that again later when it comes down to editing the test cases. Very, very simple. We also work across all different testing types. So web, mobile, and native apps are all supported. We also have cross-browser support and integrations with various device farms. We also have pre-populated Bash and PowerShell scripts for CI/CD support, and a bunch of other integrations. So test case management, video testing, with Twilio, you could do phone call testing and SMS testing. We bypassed 2FA, you know, lots and lots of really great functionalities. And we're not forcing you to do things strictly one way. As you can see, there's 5 ways of creating test cases. So there is the import option. You do have the ability to write them out in plain English. We do have a record option, which uses a Chrome extension. We also then have the use of generative AI, which I'll be talking about a little bit more as we come up. And then we do have live mode as well. Live mode is basically a live instance of your UI that you could then create test cases against. So with that, just a couple more slides. So once again, we do have test case management integration, so we could import test cases from TestRail and X-Ray, Zephyr, as well as Azure DevOps. And when it comes to, you know, some of the other key aspects of what varies between testRigor and some of those legacy tools, you know, slow test creation. The test maintenance is obviously one of those things that really eats at your bandwidth. And the broken SDLC process. So once again, you'll see that on the next slide, we really push the concept of, you know, basically taking back about 35% of your dev time due to the fact that maintenance is so much better within testRigor. So as you can see, just about 2 hours of maintenance, and you could create upwards of 2,000 automated tests per year per manual tester. So the old way of, you know, creating and running your test cases versus the new way. So, you know, obviously this is just our expectation, but once again, that this is what we've been able to see out there in the space with many of our customers. So with that being said, here are some of our customers, and I'll just leave this up for a couple of seconds because once again, we want to get right into the UI at some point. So with that, once again, just bringing up that pain slide again, because this is once again, a lot of the pain points that we really harp on trying to help resolve. So with that, let's get into testRigor. So First thing first, if you haven't been to the website yet, this is our site, and you could easily request a demo, sign up for a free trial, what have you. But as you can see, a lot of this, once again, is really pushing the plain English syntax. So you can see here, enter Kindle into search, press enter, click Kindle, add to cart. So very, very simple sort of test cases. But we'll get into this a little bit more once we get into the UI. And just one more thing before we actually get into our UI is our documentation. We pride ourselves in having very, very robust documentation. And with it, you could see here, first thing is basic commands. So your commands would be things like clicks, drags, hovers, really anything. And if I scroll down, you'll see a bunch of stuff in here. But as you can see, there's a click action. What exactly can we do with that click? Well, the options over here in the middle, double, triple, right click, middle click. So lots and lots of capabilities in here. And once again, as I scroll down, you'll see some really cool functionality like generating. Oftentimes people need to create data for their testing. We have the ability to do that, with this one command. So generate unique email. With it, we'll then be able to save that as a variable and then enter it into that specific field. And we could do that with, names, or even more complex things like leveraging a template or leveraging regex to create some sort of specifically formatted data. And then once again, I'm not going to go through the whole documentation because there's a lot in here, but built-in reusable rules specifically for Salesforce, API testing, file uploads. So once again, lots and lots of functionality in here. I just wanted to show you that because I use the documentation every single day. So you will as well. All right. So with that, now we're actually looking at the UI. So within this UI, actually, hold on. I'm going to back up one step here. In my UI, you can see here, this basically gives you a platform where you can see everything that you're doing. So I have a bunch of different folders in here for different types of testing. But as you can see, first thing that you would do is basically name your test suite and then specify the type of testing that you're looking to do. And very, very excited to mention that we just recently added support for mainframe testing as well. So this is something that once again, I've been in the space for quite a long time. I know that mainframe testing is not something easy to do. So the fact that we just released that support is pretty awesome. But based on what you specify in here, some of the settings down below will change. So right now you can see that we have an operating system of Ubuntu with a browser of Chrome. But if I change this to, let's say, mobile web, then now I have operating system for Android or iOS. And then based on that, I could then pick and choose what type of device I might want to test on. So just a couple of things there. And then the last thing that I'd like to talk about when setting up your suite is the AI aspect of that. So when first creating your suite, you have the ability to leverage AI to help create your test cases. This feature is super powerful, but obviously this is based on a very good description. So the better the description, the better your test cases are going to be. The more details in your description, the better. Okay, so that's just something I'd like to mention when you first create your suite. But keep in mind, that is not the only time you have the ability to leverage AI. Going back into that same suite, this is my Salesforce suite. So you can see that there's a button right up at the top here called Generate Test Cases based on feature description. This is another way where you can leverage that AI. So for an example, I'm going to create 5 test cases. My feature description is, well, that's actually what I used when I first created it. But let's say log in and create a lead, then delete the lead, or maybe convert it, then delete it, whatever. So I'm just going to give this something generic. And once again, the better detail, the better it is for the generation. Plus, there's also an option down here for diagrams. So if you did have a flow chart of what you're trying to test, you could also upload something like that. and the AI would be able to leverage that to create your test cases. So with that being said, I click generate. testRigor is leveraging the AI right now to create test cases. So as you can see, verify that the user can successfully log in with valid credentials and access the lead creation functionality. That sounds pretty good. You know, a lot of these look pretty decent, but let's say I don't like one of them. You know, let's just say this last one I don't like. I could click regenerate and the AI will recreate one of those. So instead of all of them, it will just regenerate one of those test cases. We could also just say, you know what, I don't like one of the words in here. So we could click edit here and just tweak one of the words. Totally up to you. But with that, I'm just going to click add and build, let it go ahead and create those. What you want to keep in mind, though, is AI is not going to do everything for you. These are AI assistants, or AI agents, but basically these are going to help you get from point A to point B. They are not going to do everything for you. So with that, while those test cases are chugging along, let's look at some test cases that I've already created and some of that reusability that I mentioned. So earlier I talked about the fact that we have built-in reusable rules. So one of those being a login. So I use that exact same type of test case, or the command, to perform a basic login and logout. So as you can see, login is my first step, and my second step is actually a reusable rule. This one I created myself. So if you want to understand what that reusable rule consists of, I can hover over this and click my command key, or press my command key rather, and it shows that this is now a clickable link. So I'm going to click on that, and now we're going to be going to the reusable rules, specifically filtered out to just look at this logout reusable rule. So you can see that I hover over this UI image object. I then click on it. I then check that the page contains settings. This is just a validation to make sure that that little window on the side opened. I also validate that it says logout before I actually try to click on logout. And then I validate at the very end that the next page, once it lands or once it loads, says login. So then I know that the full logout actually worked. So once again, these 6 steps are being called by just me pulling in this RR logout command. So once again, going back here, we can see all of the test steps related to it. So if I scroll down and swipe over a little bit, you see a screenshot of every action step. Well, not just every action step, basically every page load or every change that the UI experiences. So based on the URL that's provided, the first screenshot is going to be that loaded URL. Our next screenshot, so I just clicked once just to zoom in on that, and then the arrows will let you go left and right through the steps. So in this case, we did group up a few steps together. So my login consists of a handful of steps: entering a username, entering a password, and then clicking login. Actually, sorry, the click is not on this step, it's on the next one. But these are all still related to the login flow. But you can see the username and password are clearly in there. Then the next one, you can see that there is a little bit of a highlight, or basically that button is darkened. So you can see that we're actually pressing tab, which gets us down to that login button. So that's actually why this next screenshot, it looks a little darker. And then we're actually clicking exactly on login. So the red box that you're seeing there is representing the actual click actions. And any validations that we're performing are represented with green or kind of fluorescent green highlights. So once the login works, we're here on this next page. And once again, this test case that we're looking at is a very basic one because I'm just logging in and logging out. I'll show a more complex one in a couple of seconds. But hover over UI image. So, actually, well, that's actually interesting because it found this guy down here. So this is actually a great a great troubleshooting moment. So that object that I was leveraging there is a very generically named element. So that's my own fault. I should have been a little bit more specific with how to target this and where to target it, because once again, testRigor is looking at everything within the UI. So in this case, if I wanted to look for something specifically on the top right of the page, that's one of those other things that I can reference in the actual test case itself. So you can see here all of the excuse me, all of the different attributes that we can look at. But if I scroll down a little bit here, you can see that there are ways that we can leverage things to the left of, or to the right of, or the right top of. We could even go a bit further, and we could do some more specific things in the bottom third of the screen, second bottom quarter of the screen. So testRigor basically looks at the screen and creates blocks, creates squares to help it analyze things within the UI. So once again, I told it to hover over this. It happened to find this one down here. I could tweak this to just tell it to find that UI image top right, or UI image to the right of possibly settings. Whatever, most likely the gear is going to be settings. So I could do that. If I know the name of that notification logo up there, that bell icon, I could probably tell it to click to the right of the bell icon. So there is a variety of ways that we can, emulate things and interact with that UI. But once again, that's a very basic type of flow. So let's go into something a little bit more realistic. So once again, I have some stuff in here to create leads. So once again, I created my own reusable rules before we actually developed the built-in ones. So for an example, scroll all the way back again. So we get logged in. Once we get logged in, I have it click on home. Then I have it click on new below and on the left of selected opportunities report. Because once again, there's a variety of different new buttons in here. So by giving it specific guidance, that's how we're going to be able to find the proper elements on the screen. Continuing on, this is the next loaded page. And now I basically run through and created this once again, however I wanted to. I could have done this using the Chrome extension. I could have done this using live mode. So there's a variety of ways that this could be done. But all your clicks are going to get captured. Anything that you're hovering over, anything that you're interacting with, these will all be captured. And as you can see, now I put in testRigor.com into the first name. And then it looks like there was a little hiccup there. Looks like it actually clicked on something there by accident. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, once again, I'm not going to get totally hung up on one of these random errors in here, but once again, as you can see, you could create test cases with, individual steps with these reusable rules. You could even see down here, this is clicking on the fourth of a specific item. So if we look at this test case, we are once again getting logged in. Then we're clicking on accounts. Then once again, testRigor was told to click on the fourth TR. So it finds the first, second, third, fourth, clicked on that one. And then we're here. We do check that page contains lead. And then we're also telling it to click the icon on the right of edit. So that's the edit, and that is the icon that it found and clicked on. So you can actually see the search area that it's using to determine whether something is to the right of, to the left of, so on and so forth. Once we open that, we then set this to click delete, because once again, this is part of a reusable rule that I created to delete the lead. So in this case, I'm clicking delete. We're then clicking delete again. But obviously, if you wanted to validate that it said delete account, or are you sure you want to delete this account, we could set up validations for any of that. Once again, this was a test case that I created forever ago just to get it created. But then that be that. You can now see that we are hovering over that UI image. So now it is actually capturing that object up there. And then I actually click on it, validate the settings. So that's the green highlight that I was talking about. So check that page contains settings, which it does. Then check that page contains logout, which you can't really see the highlight of the logout there because we're also performing an action on the logout. So then basically the red box is representing that action. So I do validate once again, once the logout is completed, that technically the page should contain login, which that's our highlight. So we know that the logout worked successfully. So that right there is, once again, just how we would go about, creating a test and whatnot. But now, let's say we wanted to actually create a test on the fly. As I mentioned, we could do that using live mode. We could do a bunch of different things. I'll actually use this delete lead as my source or as my starter, because I haven't talked about any of these buttons over here on the right-hand side. But as you can see, if I click quick edit, it will show us what exactly is being done in this test case. So once again, the plain English syntax. If I click edit test case, this will actually open a new tab with the ability to obviously edit the test case, but it will also have the historical runs in here as well. So you could actually see every version of this test case since it started. So if I go back to this one, I can compare it to my current version, and you can see that there have been some changes. The left side has been removed, the right side has been added. And let's say I did want to go back to this version, I could easily roll back to this if I wanted to. But going back to, once again, those different buttons. Oops. So retest will do just that. It will run this test again. Copy will allow me the ability to copy this test case to another suite if I wanted to. View steps will just let us view the steps, but I can't edit it in here. View execution will actually give me a great deliverable. So if I wanted to share this with people across my organization, I could easily send this link, or I could either generate Word or generate PDF and share that. But as you'll see, it'll have all the screenshots, all of the action steps, basically everything that's happening. And what's even better is that if we ran this across multiple configurations, those configurations would all be listed to the right. So then we'd have a visual comparison of how things, were the same or different on a per step basis. So obviously hugely powerful. And then the last thing, or not the last thing, but the main reason I was getting into that, sorry, where were we? The delete. Well, it doesn't even really matter what test case I use to do the debugging, but so if I, once again, open this up, there's a debug button as well. Debug will basically open up that same live mode that I was speaking about earlier. But when it loads it up, it's going to load in the test case as well. So we're going to go ahead and basically take those steps that are being used and, maybe we won't use them at all. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure there's only a handful. Yeah, so we don't have to run it just because it's in here. I'm just going to go like this and delete that stuff. So now we're on our landing page, and I'm just going to click execute down here, and it's going to run the login flow, and then it's going to click on accounts. And you'll see here, this visual is going to change, but also screenshots are being taken, and all of the test steps are being loaded down below. All right. So now we're at our accounts page. At this point, I can now interact with the screen a bunch of different ways. Firstly, by default, it's set to generate command and execute, which means if I click on something in the screen, it's going to perform the action. So in that case, it just clicks the search. If let's say I didn't want it to necessarily perform the action, but I wanted to understand the application a little bit better, I could use the generate command or generate locator options to get a better understanding of things. So if I do generate command, let's say I click on contacts, you can see it's actually giving me the name of the specific icon above contacts. And you can even see it says above the contacts. But what if I click a little bit further down? Or, maybe I want to click, well, also the fact that this is open probably isn't helping the situation. But, that's the thing is like you'll be able to get specific names of elements if we want them. But this also just gives us a way of understanding the application better. So now let's do this. Since the cursor is already clicked into that, I'm going to send a type command in there. Type, let's see, brew test, because brew test is in there and I can see it. So let's just use that. So that's going to go ahead and type that in. And you can even see once again here, you see the visual change. There we go. It's been updated here. So now if I wanted to, once again, perform some action on here, I could do so, or I could also generate locator options, which would give me a couple of different things. So if I click on, let's say this one down here, it gives me, once again, the name of it. It also gives me coordinates. So if for some reason the only way I could access something is via coordinates, so be it. Obviously we wouldn't want to, but the resolutions are not going to be changing in these test cases, so those coordinates will hold true. But let's say I didn't want to do that after all. Let's say I wanted to maybe close this instead. Okay, so clear. So maybe I just tell it to click clear. And there you go. It clicks that little X. So it gets rid of my search. So once again, everything that I'm doing here in this live mode session is being saved as additional steps. So, once again, if I click finish in the session and save, it's going to save a new test case. So if any of these actions that I performed are things that I wanted to actually have in my test case, I at least had them somewhere readily available. All right, so that be that. So now let's just do this. All right, so you can see below, and once again, I love just showing these visuals because in this case, I just randomly clicked on that first TR. I didn't give it any other information, but you could see it says click TR below the brew test. So it found brew test. It found the first instance of the characters TR and it clicked on them. If I wanted it to click on the one down here, I would want to count how many there are and then specify that, or tell it to click the first TR above training task. Because once again, testRigor is a functional UI testing tool. So it does need a UI. So however your user is experiencing this application is how testRigor is going to experience it. All right, so I'm going to finish the session and save. And once again, this gets saved as a new test case. And you can see we add live mode to the beginning of it, just so you know that it was created from a live mode session, which once again, live mode and debug represent very similar things. So at this point, if I did want to run the test case, I could, but that live instance that we just had is stored down here too. So you can see that we've been running that live mode instance for about 5 minutes. And once again, all of the actions, the amount of time that we spent doing things, so on and so forth. All right, so with that being said, let's talk a little bit more about some of the UI functionality in here, because once again, we talked about live mode, which is hugely powerful. But oftentimes we come across organizations that have the need to run test cases in multiple environments, possibly. And with that functionality comes the concept of shared suites. So shared suites, and you can see I've already created the relationship here, but this basically gives you the ability to pull test cases. And actually, I'm going to do this on another one. So I'm just going to go into this one because I know I don't have it set up right now. But I could basically create a parent-child relationship between multiple suites. And with it, let's say I want to pull or create this relationship. So basically, it's going to inherit all of the Google Map test cases into this suite. Along with it, all of the rules and all of the test data. However, oftentimes, there's no need to pull in test data because you're going to use different data for a QA environment than you would a dev environment, than you would, a prod environment, and so on and so forth. So you don't have to pull everything across, but we give you the ability to if you wanted to. So with that being said, let's go and talk to one additional thing here. Well, not one. There's plenty of additional things we could talk to. And let me actually just look at the chat. I know Paul's been keeping track of that. So, all right, beautiful. Okay, so there's also this add test case button. So I've talked about all the different ways you could create test cases, but then we focus primarily on leveraging the AI and whatnot and the feature description functionality. But you could just come in here and write commands. So once again, if you know exactly what you want to do, log in, and then you want to click accounts. Once again, you need quotes around anything that the specific text that we're looking for, and then basically go from there. However, another place where you could leverage AI is these buttons here. So once again, if you're giving testRigor a description of what this specific test case is supposed to do, then we could either generate a sample test or create an actual test. And you're probably asking, what's the difference between these? The sample is more of a visual sample. So for example, let's see, create. Wow, I can't type at all today. Create a lead and convert to a contact. I think that's how it is. So in this case, once again, not very much of a description, but you can also see that there's this AI context option. So basically, you could provide a much more detailed explanation or understanding of the application here, and this will help AI understand your application a little bit better. I'm not doing that. I'm just going to give it a basic description or, something that I'd like to see. And when I generate a sample test, it does just that. And if I'm happy with what it generated, I could just click add and run, and that'd be that. But I could also take that same thing and plop it in here and click generate actual test using AI. And what's going to happen there is it's just going to run. Notice how it didn't actually show me the test case. It just created the test case, and now it's going to start running. But this is the first one that we created. So once again, log in, create lead, and in this case, generate unique name, enter into company. So we'll see all of that happening. And then the top one, once again, is building it as it goes instead of having the actual test case first built out like we had with this one. All right. Well, Oh, okay. So that's my own fault. So click leads. There's no leads for it to click on. So this is one of those things where I just had an idea. I popped it in there. But you guys, as the people that know your tool best, know your application best, you're going to know the flow that you want to test. You are going to have, specific things that you want to look for. So obviously, the more, the test cases are going to be better with the more information that you know about it and the more specifics that you can put together when creating one of your test cases. All right. So with that being said, I know we have a little bit less than 15 minutes to the top of the hour. I do want to just open it up if there are any questions that have not been asked yet. So if there are any questions, have at it.
There's one in the chat, so maybe I'll read it out loud. So most of the low coding tools use Selenium or Playwright as the library behind to execute test cases. Which library is being used to run the test cases, or is it a custom built library behind it?
Yeah, that is a great question. It is actually a collection of custom built libraries. And along with that, we're leveraging ChatGPT as well as our own proprietary large language models, a variety of other technologies, including Selenium, Appium, JavaScript, Java, a variety of things. But it's, once again, all being done behind the scenes, so you don't really see any of it. It's just, that's the beauty of the AI. So Frederic,
Great.
hopefully that helps answer that question for you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, then I could show a few additional things. Yeah. Okay. So I'm still sharing my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Beautiful. So once again, I talked about shared suites and how that allows you the ability to create multiple suites from one. So this is just helpful once again for different environments. But there's also some other information over here. For example, if there's an error that's being experienced, obviously, if this is something that you deem to be a bug, we have integrations with bug tracking tools too. So you can see I already have my Jira integration set up here. But if you're using Azure DevOps, this button would change. But basically, this gives you a nice single click that you could then leverage to create a bug in Jira or in Azure DevOps. Additionally, reporting. So within testRigor, obviously reports are huge because you're running all of these different test cases. You need to know how things are going. So we really harp on pushing the concept of using labels within the test cases, because that's going to obviously help you when it comes down to actually, getting good reports. And sorry, I was just trying to jump back here to show this at a little bit of a higher level. But every single test case, you can just come in and click add label and add whatever label you want. So you can see, like, there's one down here for logout. There's one for test data, because this one I believe is data driven. But we have customers that will just name a bunch of their test cases smoke for their smoke tests. So then you can actually run test cases based on that label. So that's kind of where I was going with that. So not only can you break up your reporting by labels, you can run your test cases based on labels. And if you're doing multiple configurations, that would also be broken down here as well. And we also provide historical reports. So if you want to see how things are going over time, we could easily, change our date range, apply that, see how that impacted things. So that's another really cool feature. Another thing that I actually sometimes forget to show is the tree view. And the tree view is a really, really cool feature that basically shows you, it's kind of like, your page object model, if you think about it. It's not, but when we're looking at it, so right now you can see home screen. If I click this open, we now have a bunch of different test cases that go through that home screen. So there's a login one here where once I get to the home screen, I click on the login button. And then I could go in and see this. And then there's, once again, a variety of different paths that we're hitting once we're on that home screen. So depending on really what you wanted to understand, like start my free trial, okay, that goes down another path. So this is a really good way of just understanding what's covered, what's not. We also then have capture data. So every time you use the generate functionality inside of testRigor, we're generating data for you. When we generate that, we store it somewhere too. So as you can see here, we're storing whatever it is. So in this case, generated error, generated first name, object type, object name, you know, so there's a variety of things that are in here, but once again, we store it so you can then reference it later. All right. CI/CD. Talked about it earlier, just at a high level, pre-populated shell and PowerShell and Bash scripts. And so you can see if I just click on one versus the other, it will change. If I scroll down, we will go through all of the different APIs that are available in here as well. So you can see that there's a retest API. There's an API specifically for branching and committing tests. One for running a test case based on UUID. So the UUID is this number right here, which is specific to that one test case. So if you did want to run a specific test case, you could do that. Running tests by labels. Once again, a bunch of other stuff in here. Statuses, just, you know, getting the status of a test case. But as you can see, once again, we have so much stuff documented inside of testRigor, and also, you know, support is just a click away, really. So under resources, once again, I've been harping on the documentation so much, but that's one thing. And then we also have a bunch of other things in here. How-to articles. Yeah, Chrome extension that I talked about earlier is up here. So since we're here, might as well show it, but right here. So for an example, before I click record, let's do this. I'll go back to all suites. Then I will click start new recording, and then test. Then I'm going to select native hybrid, test again. Let's see if that even takes. And then maybe I'm going to switch this to 5, and then upload and create. And I want to validate that. Maybe it says that. Okay. So with that being that, I'm just going to come back up here to my Chrome extension. I'm going to stop my recording, and you can see that it picked up on a majority of things there. So it hovered over testRigor brew test, which was basically just one of the elements up there. Then it enters test into the test suite name. It's selected native from that type of testing dropdown. And then it enters test into username, test into password. Sorry, I scrolled down too fast. Scroll down, it selected 5 from the number of test cases. So basically it captured everything I just did with that Chrome extension. So if I did want to just add it to my test suite, I could just do add and run because it's already associated here. But this is not my Salesforce testing. I would want this to run on, you know, a different suite that I have. So I would basically pick the suite and then add and run, or I could just copy it from here and then paste it into a new test case. So I could just come back here, add test case, paste, add and run. So let's see. I feel like that's a good amount of the UI. Obviously, there's some other things, but most of those would be like within the settings, and there's a very large amount of settings. So that's something that's better suited for when you're actually like running a POC or running a trial.
Okay, First of all, a big thank you, Bruno, for the great session. I really appreciate you sharing your insights with us today.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. I really appreciate your time and hope to see you at the next one. Thank you, Bruno.
You're very welcome. Thanks,
you,
everybody.
Bruno. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Bye-bye.